All right. What did we learn last week?
Making our backend interactive, or rather, no, not interactive, but make sure front end backend interactive. There you go.
Yep. We started our first API server. What framework are we using for our API?
Node, I think. Node, right? Node.
Node is the server, but there's a particular framework that we're using that runs on top of Node. That
NodeMon.
is, what's that, Jennifer?
NodeMon.
NodeMon is related, but not quite. NodeMon is the developer tool that we use to automatically restart the Node server whenever it monitors our code and sees that there's a change for it. So we use NodeMon to run Node, which is using what framework? What framework are we using?
Express.
Express, that's it. So Express is what makes it a little bit easier for us to get an HTTP server up and running. It makes it easier for us to have our different routes and our body parsing and all of that kind of stuff.
Express is a backend framework. I don't know how I missed that. Okay.
It is, yes. Yeah, we would only ever use Express in to build an API server. What else did we learn last week? We have any light bulb moments from last week? Any moments that clicked with your ERD homework over the weekend, or how are we feeling? Feeling
I had
like we could,
light
yeah,
bulb.
go for it.
I had light bulb moments on SQL.
Okay,
I don't want to sound like I'm advertising. I keep bringing it up, but LinkedIn Learning, use that as a resource. They delved into it pretty well and now just have a slightly better understanding of things. So
nice. Yeah, and SQL is one of those things that unfortunately we don't have a ton of time to spend on in our curriculum. We definitely touch on it and go a little bit more than what we need to make sure that you have what you need to get your capstone working. But keep in mind that database SQL and database design are 2 semesters worth of classes, right? And they're normally a semester each. So if you are interested in the database, if you're like, hey, the SQL stuff is pretty cool, or maybe I could use this for a little bit more data analytics, or I would like to be able to manage a database that may have a million different rows in it. That is certainly a career path that you can go down, right? We don't have the time, unfortunately, to do that deep dive and say, hey, let's spend 3 months talking about how a database should be designed and talking about all the rules of normalization and then getting into relational versus non-relational databases. But that is certainly something that you can do a deeper dive into, and LinkedIn Learning is a great place to start for that. You also can actually get certification on SQL. I believe Oracle offers it. I'm not sure if Microsoft offers it anymore. But basically, if you take SQL design and SQL itself, you can get a certification from Microsoft or Oracle on that.
do certs hold weight?
Great question. Depends on who you ask. And it depends on the job title. So in project management, there is something called the PMI, the Project Management Institute, and they are the de facto certification. So if you want to be a project manager full time, that certification will certainly hold weight. It will be very hard to get a full time project management job without either saying that you're enrolled in a class working towards your certification or actually have that certification. Project management is surprisingly standardized across different companies. And because of that, that certification matters a little bit more. If you want to work at Microsoft and you want to be a full-time database engineer, obviously the Microsoft SQL certification is going to matter a little bit more. But there may be other companies that say, oh, that's great, you finished free code camp in JavaScript. That means you got through it, but they don't really put a ton of weight behind that certification. So as with most questions, the answer is it depends. And there are a ton of certifications that I don't know about, but probably are industry relevant. I know that's a big thing with cloud architecture now in DevOps is getting a certification for a particular cloud. And if the company that is providing the certification is also hiring, that is certainly something that they will look at. So that's just a great thing to ask a recruiter or an interviewer, right? You could go in and say, hey, I'm just getting started in the job market right now. I read this cloud architect job description. I think that I really would like to get into that. How many jobs are available in that field or that job title? And they may say, we're constantly hiring for it. We've been hiring it for the past 5 years. At that point, you could say, all right, let me go look into how long the certification takes. Is there a class with it? Is the class free, or is the class low cost? Because it may be worth investing in taking that class if that's something where you really want to focus your career into. Any other questions? Any other light bulb moments from last week? How are we feeling about the chat project?
I was
Okay.
happy you were able to help me get it going.
This is an interesting point in the program because the steps themselves don't get harder. They're just become more of them, right? Because it's not just the front end or the back end anymore. Now starting today, we're gonna layer another piece into that. We're gonna layer in the database as well. And so if anything is wrong at any point in that stack, everything just stops working, right? And so don't be afraid to raise your hand, especially if you've been staring at something for 5 minutes and you feel like the bus is leaving without you. Raise your hand, interrupt. We're going to get through it. This class tends to go a little rockier, just like when we started to introduce the back end, because there are just lots of little steps to follow along with. So tonight we're going to dive back into Beekeeper. We're going to get our own database set up. We're going to learn how to connect that in to our backend code. And then we're going to practice all 4 CRUD operations: create, read, update, delete. And so we are going to take our existing code and use that as a base, but we're going to start modifying that a little bit. Any questions before we dive in tonight? Okay.
Max, yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
be expecting the feedback from the ERD assignment.
I should be able to start getting to those tomorrow. And we probably have a couple days of class before you're ready to take that ERD and really start implementing it in your database. But definitely by the end of the week, because you will be at a point at the end of the week that you'll want to start taking that ERD design and starting to build out your SQL tables. And that will start to click as we go throughout the week.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to dive into my CIC my code and my week 18. Day 4 was that career day. So we don't have a day 4. We're starting off on our day 3. So go into your chat backend. I've actually already done this step, but click on your node modules and delete out that folder. And then switch over to your front end, and you're also going to delete out the node modules folder. Nothing else, just the node modules in both of those folders. If you are behind on your code and just want to leapfrog to where my code is at, you can go ahead and download that day 3 zip file that I just put in the Slack live stream channel, if you prefer to use my code to kind of catch up to where we're at. I'm going to make my week 19 folder. And I'm going to go to my week 18. I'm going to grab my day 3 and I'm going to hit Command C on it because we don't want to move it. We just want to copy it. I'm going to go to my week 19 and I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. From there, I'm going to rename that to day 1. And now I have 2 different things I need to open in VS Code, my front end and my back end. If anyone needs a repeat of a step, let me know now. Okay, so I'm going to take my back end and I'm going to open that in VS Code by just dragging the folder over. I'm going to rinse and repeat on my front end. I'm going to grab that and I'm going to drag that into my VS Code. If you prefer to use file new window and file open folder, that's totally fine. Talai, go ahead.
Did you already deleted your node modules from whatever you post? Okay, thank you.
From both the front end and the back end. Yes, I deleted those. Okay. Oh, Archero.
All right, so we create week 19. We move day 3.
We copy day 3. We don't move it, we copy it.
Okay, all right. So we're going
Single
to
click on it, Command C to copy, and then over to week 19 and Command V to paste. And then
Alright.
go ahead and rename day 3 to day 1 now that it's in your week 19 folder.
Okay. I'm there, so I think I'm caught up then so far.
Then open up both your folders in 2 separate windows in VS Code and you'll be caught up.
Okay, so back end in one window and the front end in another one.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Max.
All right. Once we get both of them opened in VS Code and kind of position where we want, we've got to pay the price for deleting those node modules. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on package.json and open an integrated terminal. And we're going to do this on both the front end and the back end. So I'm going to do my npm install. And while that's going through, I'm going to switch over to my back end. I'm going to right click on any of the files open in integrated terminal and run my npm install again. From there, I'm going to switch back to my front end and do an npm start and hit enter. That's going to pop open my React in a browser. And I'm also going to go to my backend. And remember, this is not Node. So we can't run this with npm start. What we need to do is start it with nodemon. But that's kind of annoying, right? Because we've got to remember that nodemon syntax every single time. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just type in npm start and have it do the right thing? In fact, we can do that. We're going to go to our package.json file. And under this script section in here, I'm going to throw a comma at the end of it. And I'm going to say, hey, the way you start the server is by running npx nodemon server.js. This is inside the scripts object. So make sure that you're inside there. Throw a comma at the end of the test line and put a new one in for start. Because we have that in there, make sure you save the file before you click out of it. When we go down to our terminal and run npm start, notice what it threw in the terminal for us. It said, hey, npx nodemon server.js. Well, how did it know to do that? Because we told npm the way to start this project is by running npx nodemon server.js. If everything is working, you should see that your server is running on port 3001. If you get an error that the error address in use, make sure you don't have the terminal running from Wednesday's class. Make sure you don't have anything else hogging that port. When you switch over to the browser, you can go to inspect. Now, I have a bunch of errors in here because my front end loaded before my back end was fired up and ready to go. So in order to make sure I'm still not having that issue, I'm going to hit the refresh button And now I should see my received from my backend and no errors in the console. I'm going to pause there, give everyone a minute to catch up. Let me know if there are steps that I need to repeat. Jennifer, where did you get lost?
I couldn't find my files, so I got lost a while ago. I kept getting stuff mixed up. So I've got the folders copied.
Okay.
Am I supposed to go in and delete the node?
Nope. Once you got them copied over, just open both of them in VS Code.
Okay.
And if you have the node modules folder in there already, you don't need to run npm install. If you deleted them out to get the copy to go quicker, you need to run npm install.
Right. I don't know what I'm doing.
I'm going to go to Artrell and Schneider, and then I'll come back to you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Artrell, go ahead.
All right, so in the front end, integrated terminal npm install.
Yep.
Do the same with the back end?
Yep.
All right, so hold on. So npm install. Okay.
And once you do them in both, on the front end, you can go ahead and run npm start.
npm start. Okay, so that's working on that.
Now in the back end, we opened up package.json and we added this new line in scripts called start.
Okay, STAR.
What that told npm to do was it told it how to start our server using NodeMon.
All right, start npm nodemon server.js. That's what we type in, right?
Yep, make sure you've got a comma on the end of the test line above it as well.
Oh, okay. And just leave that up for me, please, Max, because I'm not a super fast typer.
Did you start? You started last year, right?
Just did. And then once you've got that start command in your package.json, you can go down to the integrated terminal and do an npm start and hit enter. And that should give you that your server is running on 3001. You good to go, Artrell?
1 second. npm start. Let's see, unknown command, nodemon. Is it supposed to say unknown command?
npx, not npm.
npx start.
Oh, no. Sorry. It's the command in your terminal is npm start. But
Right,
you want to
okay.
make sure that in your package.json, you have npx.
Oh, I have npm. Okay, so
So think about it as npm is where you start it, but the scripts portion of the package.json that belongs to npm is kind of doing a shortcut for you. It's saying when I run npm start, I'm going to basically shortcut or alias it and just run whatever is in the package.json under the start command.
Okay.
And that is considered best practice because there are a lot of different ways that you might be starting a node project. And so by putting in whatever command you're going to start it with makes it easier for other people who may be using your project to know how to get it going.
All right, now it says it's running on port 3001.
Beautiful. Anyone else need help?
Did Schneider get to go?
I'm okay
He
now. Thank you.
okay, cool.
All right, so I've got both front end and back end open. I've got my
Okay.
integrate terminals open.
Yep.
And I need to do npx install.
npm install if you don't have your node modules. You only need to do the install if the node modules folder is not hanging out in your files.
No, I'm not finding it anywhere.
Okay, so then go ahead and do your install, and that is going to get your node modules up and running. And you need to do that in both the front end and the back end. You don't need to wait for one to complete in order to do the other.
All right. All right, good. Now do I need to run nodemon?
Then you want to do your npm start in your front end, and in your back end, we added this line to package.json so that we don't have to use the nodemon command every time. We can run start on that as well. So once you have this start in your package.json, don't forget to add the comma. You can do an npm start in your backend terminal. And as soon as you see running on 3001, you're good to go.
Okay, so I can type in npm start here now.
Yep.
No, I didn't like that in my backend.
Did you add the start command to package.json?
The start npx.
Start npx nodemon server.js.
Yep,
And you have a comma up here.
that's probably the problem. That's the problem. I'll try that again. Got 3001 there, and my front end. It should just say Webpack compiled successfully, and my window opened. I've got
And you're
my.
good to go. You're all caught up.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, so we've got everything set up. Now let's just do a very quick review. In our SRC, in app.js, we have some code in here that is making a fetch call. And that fetch call happens in our use effect with the empty array. So what we're doing is we're saying, hey, go to 3001. Wait, how does our backend know it's 3001? Because we told it in the server.js to listen to 3001. So we're over here and we're saying, hey, go make a fetch to the messages. Okay, well, where's our endpoint messages? If I come up here, here's my server.get, fetch defaults to a get method by default. That was a stupid sentence. Fetch defaults to get. Sorry. Inside of that, our route needs to line up. So our messages here lines up with our messages over here. Great. This fetch is now making the request, and it's awaiting for the response to come back. So this fetch makes the request. Then we come over here and we get the request right here. And because the endpoint lines up and the method lines up, what we do is in the response, in the RES, we send back the messages. Well, where are the messages coming from? They're coming from our array up here. And in that array, there is an object that has 3 different keys: the text, the timestamp, and the sent. Okay, all of that's cool. So I come back over here. Now we take the JSON and we parse that out, because the internet is not good at sending anything other than strings. So we take the JSON, we parse it, we console log our data just to make sure we can see all of that. And then what do? We take the messages inside of the data and set it into state. Setting it into state is what triggers this whole re-render of the messages list to show the new messages in there. Okay, pretty cool. We did something very similar with our message input here. When we were in the input, we sent a post request this time to the backend. The backend needed to know, hey, not only is the content type we're sending in JSON, but we are actually stringifying that out, right? We're saying, hey, take the message text that's coming from our on change, getting stored in state, and send that information in the body. Okay, well, that lines up right over here. Now we've got our server.post that is sending to the message. Now this and this won't get mixed up because it's a different type. So you can have different methods all using that same URL. We're going to see that in a minute. Then we push into our array. That shows up here, and we send back the messages. Then on our front end, we take that, we set that into state, and we're good to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here, and this is where we left off. I'm in here and I say ABC and I hit send. Now, if I open this in another tab, my ABC shows up. Okay, why? Because those are getting stored. Now, servers certainly will be on much longer than a normal window would be, or a front end, but they're not infallible. They will reboot when there's a power outage, or a hard drive might go offline, or they might need to reboot for a security update. Well, our code is set up to reboot automatically whenever we make changes here. So if I just add an exclamation point and hit save, NodeMon, you'll notice down in the terminal, automatically rebooted for us. Well, we normally want that to happen, but when we come over here and refresh, my ABC is now gone. Could store those messages in a file on the backend server. And if people try and send a message at the same time, trying to write into the same file, that could cause some corruption. What happens is a bunch of different do is database. And I don't, you guys hear me okay?
Your voice is breaking, Max.
Yeah, it's breaking up.
Oh, great. All right, give me a minute. Let's find out if it's me or Zoom. Couldn't tell if you guys were really good at sitting still or I was just that boring. not appear to be my internet. Let's try and push on, and hopefully we don't run into any other issues. Okay. So the answer that you couldn't hear me explaining was we basically need to move this into the database. Before we can even get our node code connected to the database, we need to get our database set up. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a search for Postgres. Not Postman, Postgres. So if we hit enter and open that up, you guys, I know you're on a newer version than me, that's okay. Hopefully we have something that says running. If you do not have something that says running, you can go ahead and hit the start button or the initialize button. Does anyone not have their Postgres running? So if we don't have Postgres running, Beekeeper has nothing to connect to. So the database is a server, right? And I have all of these databases in my Postgres server. In order to show you how we create them, what I'm going to do is open Beekeeper. I did a command space and did a search for Beekeeper. Now, if you have the connection from last time, you should have local DB saved in a bookmark right over here. If you don't, you're going to need to connect the database connection type is Postgres. Localhost is the information, 5432 is the default port. Your username will be whatever your Mac's username is. That is going to be shown here. So I have Hack Upstate in my Postgres app. Because of that, I'm able to type Hack Upstate in here, both as the user and as the default database. You have this pop-up probably that says your free trial ends in 3 days. We're going to deal with that in 3 days when it becomes an issue. There is a free version. I'm hoping it will let us just switch over to that. If it doesn't, we have to reinstall it, but we'll deal with that on Thursday when our free trial runs out. So you can go ahead and hit the little X on the bottom right, and that will close that out. So you should have test and connect. So if you click the connect button, it should bring you in to our teachers table that we were playing with last. Does anyone not have their teachers table or not have the entities or has any connection issues?
Do you mind explain? Do you mind explain? Oh, after all.
Yeah, Max. So mine kind of looks like your screen now, but that's what it looked like when you first got into yours. So that threw me off a little bit. But I do have the teachers where it still says like Max and test.
Perfect. Then you're good to go. As long as you are connected in, as long as you can see like your database name in the top left and then public in some folder there, you're good. You're connected in.
Okay.
Kalai, did you have a question?
I got it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So what we do is now that we're in here, we're in this database called Hack Upstate. And we kind of want to keep everything separated over, right? Because what happens if our chat app grows? What happens if we want to support multiple different conversation threads? Well, at that point, we don't want to intermingle our default database or usernames database with other data. So we are going to make an entirely separate database. If you hit the little plus button up at the top, it will load in a new query screen for you that we can write some SQL in. We are going to write the SQL, create database, and then what are we going to call it? We're going to call it chat. Now, when we click this run button, we are going to get query, no results, 0 rows affected. And it's like, what do you mean 0 rows affected? Well, we didn't affect any rows. We affected an entire database. And to prove this works, we can go back over to the Postgres app and now look, I have this database called chat. Well, that's great and all, but wouldn't it be nice if we could connect into it? In fact, we can. If we go back over to Beekeeper, we don't need to go back to the connection screen because it's all on the same database server. We just created a new database inside the server we already had running. If I click on this here, I should have my chat drop down. You may not, though, and that's because SQL loves refresh buttons. So what you may need to do is click this little refresh button to the left of the add button. You can go ahead and click on that, and nothing looks like it happened. But when you click on the dropdown, you should now be able to see your chat database. Okay, so now I'm in here, and I've got all of this information schema. And I'm like, oh, I don't want any of that. What do I want to do? What's the first step I should do in moving my messages app into the database? You're on mute, Brian, if you're talking to us.
I was kind of talking to myself. I mean, my guess is connected.
So we could. The problem that we're going to run into is once we get it connected, there's no data in the database, right? There's no way for us to test the connection. It's not entirely true, but there's no way to test the connection and actually see the data flowing through it. In order to do that, we've created our database, but what do we put information into? Not just the database, we need a table. So at this point, I go, okay, I'm in my chat database. I want to create a new table. But do you think I remember the syntax every single time I need SQL? Absolutely not. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to W3 Schools, and we're going to say create table. And the first one that comes up, clearly a well-used link for me, says create table, the table name, all of the columns, and their data types. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. I'm going to delete out my create database chat. I'm done with that. I don't need to create any new databases called chat. I'm going to create my table. And what am I storing in here? I'm storing my messages. Okay, now I need my parentheses. And I can specify my columns in here. Archel, go ahead.
Thanks, Max. Before I get too deep in the weeds, I did the create database chat, and I tried to save it, but it didn't show up. And
Did you click the little refresh button here?
I did.
Share screen.
Okay. All right, so I have this here, right?
Yep. Did you click the run button?
I didn't. I just hit save.
Saving and running are not the same thing.
All right, so I just clicked on run.
Okay, now hit your little refresh.
All right.
Now open the drop down, and there you go.
All right, so now we're going to get rid of this, right?
Well, switch into the chat database. You're still in your username database. So use that drop down, set it to chat. And
Okay.
now you can clear that out.
All right, so now we're going to create a table, right?
Yep.
And what do we call this table?
Messages.
All right.
Okay, now We're
Run?
like, what's that?
Do I
Nope,
hit run?
not yet.
Okay,
We
okay,
we got to tell it what goes in that table. What's the data structure?
right.
And now I'm like, all right, well, best practice is to have an ID. So I'm going to make the ID and I'm going to use a special data type to Postgres called serial. And what serial does for me is it makes it auto increment. It makes it auto generate. It knows that it's an integer. It does a lot of magic for us under the hood. So we're going to do create our table messages. Our ID is serial. And now I'm like, well, what else should go in here? I could start making up some columns. Like I know I need my message text and the timestamp and all of that stuff, but we've done this before. So we should make sure that whatever our app code is using lines up with whatever we're about to put in the database. So I'm going to move this over and I'm going to look at this object. And in the back end, I have my text, my timestamp, and my sent. And I'm like, oh, all those sound pretty good. Why don't I just reuse those? So I'm going to say, hey, my text is going to be the data type of text. And my timestamp is going to be, shocker, a data type of timestamp. And my sent is going to be a Boolean. Now, you may say, Max, how do you know what all of those data types are? Great question. If you go and do a search for Postgres data types, you will see an entire breakdown in their manual of all the data types and the description of them. We would never use quite this many of them, but text, Boolean, serial, those are all integer. Those are all common ones for your database. Now, there's no way I got this right on the first try. So I'm going to hit the run button and it says no results. And over here, I've got my messages. So I'm going to call it a little liar. I'm going to pop that open. And sure enough, look what we got. We got our text, our timestamp, and our sent. Now, for the last step, we created the table. Now we should put some data into it. Now, I could write my insert into SQL command over here, and that would work, but there's an easier way of doing it. If I click on the little refresh button here, if you don't have messages in this sidebar, I said it once, I'll say it a gazillion times, Beekeeper and Postgres love their little refresh buttons. So hit the little refresh button, then double click on your messages table, and that's going to pop open this, and it says there's no data in it. Well, we can fix that. I'm going to go, oh, I did not do the ID right. Crap. All right. We're going to try this again. So I got my table as read only. Apparently, serial does not do all of the magic that I want it to do. So we're going to go back to our query and I'm going to try, I got to look that up. Alter table, data type, Postgres. Alter table, table name, alter column, column name, type what we want to change it to. So I'm going to try this as alter table, messages, alter column, ID, and set the type to serial primary key. Now we've got to be careful here. We've got two different commands that we've got written out. We don't want to run both of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the second one because I only want that second one to run, and I'm going to hit run selection. And it doesn't want to use the primary key. Okay, give me a minute. Okay. So turns out that you don't use the alter column command. You use a command called add restraint. However, that's getting into the weeds. And we did not follow a best practice, which is setting the primary key when the table was created. So I'm going to just, because we don't have anything in our messages already, it's going to be easier to just drop the table, to delete the table, and then recreate it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to delete out that alter table, and I'm going to do my drop table messages. Artrell.
In my Beekeeper on the left, under entities, I don't have the public folder. Should I?
You're fine because we're going to recreate the table here.
All right, because I have the create table all the way down to sent, and like that's where I stopped.
That's fine. So we're going to run this command called drop table messages. So I hit run selection on that. And now your public, you'll notice, disappears. That deleted the table. Then I'm going to go back up to my ID and be a little bit more specific and say, hey, when I create my table, the ID serial is the primary key. But we've got to be careful here because if we just hit run, it's going to create my table. Then it's going to come down and go, oh, you want to drop that table. So what we want to do is be careful, highlight just the create table messages, hit run selection on that, and now over here, we should have our messages. If you pop that open, we should now not have read only down in the bottom, and we're good to go. I'm going to pause there and let you guys catch up, though. The order of this all matters. We do our drop table first. That deletes it. We highlight it. We hit run selection. Then we come back up to our create table. We put our primary key in, and then we hit run. We highlight the whole command, and then we hit run selection. Jennifer.
Hey, Max. When I did the drop table thing,
Yep.
It says there's a problem because relation messages already existed.
Did you highlight the command before you hit run?
No.
So that means it was running that create table when you meant to run the drop table command. So you got to highlight what you want it to run before you have it run it.
Okay, so now I've got that whole long list of entities.
Now go up to your create table, throw the word primary key, the words primary key after serial, and rerun that. Artra, what's up?
All right. When I created the create table messages, I never clicked on run. So do I still need to include the drop table or no?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to try run and see what happens.
Anyone else need help?
I think I'm good, but if I get in the weeds again, I'll let you know.
Sounds good. So if Jennifer, still need help, or is that a previous raise hand?
Sorry.
You're good. I didn't lower it. Okay, so now that I'm in my messages table, I can finally get around to creating my first message. So I'm going to go down to this plus button down here. Make sure you're in the messages tab. If you're not in messages, just double click on the table over here. That's going to pop it open for you. You can close a couple of these other ones so we don't get lost. Okay, so in my messages table, again, we could go in here and start writing our insert into, right? But that's old school. We're not going to do that. We're going to go to messages. We're going to hit the little plus button down at the bottom. And I'm going to not put in my ID because if we did serial right, well, if we did it right the second time, it should auto-generate that ID for us. So the text I'm going to put in as my first DB message. And the timestamp, I'm actually going to use a little trick here. I'm going to say, hey, the time that I want you to put in there is right now. So these parentheses are telling SQL generate that time for us. And finally, whether or not I sent this message. And because we set it as a Boolean, you notice we've got this nice little drop down here. So I'm going to say false. I didn't send that message. That was something that I received. Now you think this would be done, but just like with SQL, where we have to highlight it and hit run, we also have to do the same even when we're using the user interface. So I'm going to come down here and hit the apply button. And now look what it looks like. It generated my ID for me. Okay, cool. It has my text in there. It executed the now, and it still set it to false. All right, let's practice out one more time. This time, I'm going to say my sent message, timestamp will still be now, and sent will be true. The main thing that we're testing here is that we have a sent and a not sent. We want two different kinds of information. We come down to the bottom, we hit apply, and because we set our ID to serial, it is now making that ID based off of one more than whatever the last one was.
Okay, so how did you put that information in, Max?
The plus button down in the bottom right. Oh, that might be cut off. Sorry, the plus button right here.
And then I had to just enter a value.
Yep. You want to leave ID blank. The text, you can type in whatever. The timestamp is going to be now with parentheses at the end. And then you should have one row for true and one row for false under sent. So think
Okay.
about it like a spreadsheet. The only difference is you have to add each row before you can fill in values.
Okay, so I'm sorry, how do I do that? I put my database up in that top value bar.
You hit the plus here. That gives you this green row.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can type in whatever you want. My
Oh.
third message.
Oh, shoot.
Then the timestamp is going to be now, and the sent is going to be either true or false. And once you leave the ID blank, you type whatever you want in for the text, the timestamp is going to be now, and the sent is going to be true or false. Once you have that, because it's still in green, we know it actually hasn't run yet. In order to get it to run, we come down here and we hit the apply button, and that's what saves it into the database.
Okay.
All right, so we've got our database set up. We're feeling pretty good. We know our trail.
Max, I'm sorry, I don't know why today I'm like struggling. So I feel like I guess I had to double click on messages for it to pop up top because it took me a minute to get there, but I'm there. Then I hit the plus button on the bottom right next to the little sprocket.
Yep.
I input in the text field, I input in the timestamp, and I input in the sent.
Yep.
After that, I clicked on apply at the bottom. Was that what I was supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I only put in one message so far, but outside of that, am I where I need to be?
Yep. Just one more message and you're good.
All right, because the way on my screen with the Zoom, like everyone in the meeting, they're on the right-hand side, so I missed that section of your screen a little bit.
Gotcha.
All right, thanks for your patience, Max.
Yep.
I'm right there with you, Archel.
Okay. So we're gonna, once we get our two rows in, once we get one true and one false for the sent column, we're gonna slowly back away from the database. Now what we do is we go back to our JavaScript code and we tell our JavaScript code how to access into our database. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch back over to the back end. I'm going to go down to my terminal, and remember, we can't install anything new until we stop the server. So to stop the server, I'm going to hit Control C. That stops it. That brings me back to my terminal. And I'm going to npm install PG. PG stands for Postgres. And I'm going to hit the enter button on that, and that's going to take a minute. And once it's done, I don't want to forget to have to restart the server. So to restart it, I'm going to do my npm start and hit enter. Now I didn't change any of my code. All I did is install Postgres. So now that Postgres is installed, I can use it in my code. In order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, up at our imports, we now need another import. And what we're going to import is the client. Because in order to access the database server, we need our node code to be a client to connect to the server. And we're going to do that from PG. Oh, my code just hates me tonight. Okay, I lied. We're going to do that a little differently. We're going to import we're going to import Postgres, and then we're going to make the client by using Postgres dot client. Okay, sorry, 2 new lines there. We're going to do our import Postgres from PG. That's what's pulling it in from npm. And now we've got to use that import to work in our code. So we say, hey, go to Postgres. This Postgres lines up with this Postgres right here. Use the client and store that in our thing called client. Now, believe it or not, that client isn't connected to anything yet. It's been made, but it's not set up to connect. So what we do is we say, hey, client dot connect. Okay. Still don't have any data. So that's what we need to do next. I am going to say, hey, I'm going to come down to my get messages. This is where I'm going to play around with getting this to work. And I'm going to say, hey, let's await a client dot query. And what's that query going to do? Let's say it is going to select everything from my messages. Now I get a red squiggly. I'm using await. What do I need to do?
Add async somewhere.
Add async to whatever that parent function is. Now I need to do something with those responses. So I'm going to say const my DB result is equal to that whole client.query. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to console log out my DB result. So I save that and I'm like, all right, everything's running, server's up and running. Let's go and try and test it. So I go to my browser, I open a new tab, I go to localhost 3001/messages, and I get, ooh, crash the server. I'm like, well, that's not what I want. So I come back over here, I look in the terminal, and I scroll up, and I see that there's an error. Okay, it's kind of interesting. So I keep scrolling up. Relation messages doesn't exist. Okay, what is that trying to tell us?
It's I feel like it's not making that connection.
It's not making
Oh.
the connection because when we're in Beekeeper, we see our messages here, but what is our messages table in?
I
It's
mean,
in our database
database.
called chat.
Oh,
So the problem is that we were like, go connect, go out into the ether, go find a database. And it's like, all right, I'll use your default database name. That's your username. So we need to provide it more information in the connection. We need to say, I'm sorry, not here, up here in the client, we need to say, hey, the database that we want to connect to is called chat. So I come back over, I refresh my server, and now I've got this information. And I'm like, well, receive from backend isn't what I'm looking for. Where are my 3 messages? I come back over to my terminal and look at all of the stuff that I have in here. Field, timestamp, field, sent. Well, that's kind of interesting. Oh, look, there are my messages from my database. There's my first, my sent, my third message. That's in this thing called rows. So now we just need to connect the two together, and then don't worry, I'm taking a break. All we need to do is instead of sending back my messages that are coming from my array right here, all we need to do is say, hey, instead, send back the messages from the DB result dot rows. Come back over to my backend, I refresh, and I've got my database messages now showing up. So I'm going to pause there. Lots of changes. Let me relaunch the poll and then do a recap of the changes. So we installed Postgres down here in the terminal. We made sure we hit Control-C first. Then we did our npm install, PG, then we hit enter. Then we came back up here to the import Postgres and we added that in. Then we had to use Postgres. So we made a new client because whenever you have your database server, that's what's running in Postgres, we need to connect to that using a client. So we say, hey, const client equals new Postgres client, but we've got to give it the configuration here. We've got to tell it, hey, you're connecting into the chat database. From there, we say, now that you know how to connect, go ahead and connect in for me. Finally, we've got to test to make sure this connection is working. So I come down here and I get into my await and I say, hey, go select star from messages. That looks pretty familiar, right? That's our SQL. It's a little weird that we're doing SQL in JavaScript, but if we run that query based off of what we connected to, we can get the results and store it right here. Once we get the results, we pull the rows out of those results and send it back in the backend. In order to prove all of this is working, we can go over to our browser, go to /messages on our localhost 3001, and hopefully see all of the content that is in our database. I'm a little concerned that 5 of you guys are at no, but keep going in the poll. And the reason why I'm sharing that is because you guys have to do this on your capstone. This is how you make your capstone full stack. So I would encourage you guys get the practice now. Once we hit break, I will share out my current code just to help you leapfrog up. But you guys are going to have to do this on your capstone. So getting the practice now is good. We're going to go back to the blog project and we're going to go through all of these steps again. We've got one more thing to cover. And then we're going to move on to the blog project. So I would really encourage you guys to practice doing this because this is not something that you learn through osmosis, right? This is something that you learn through practice and getting it working. But we're going to take a couple minutes here. I'm sure there will be some questions. Take your time, try and get through the code. And most importantly, even if you are following along, even if you're not typing along, but you're following along, have my live stream open. Try and talk yourself through the code. Make sure you can understand what you're telling the code to do there. Brandon.
We just do npm start again when it crashes, right?
When it crashes, you should figure out why it's crashing.
Okay, because yeah, okay, so says app crash waiting for file changes before starting.
So scroll up a little bit there and look for, it's going to tell you why it crashed. What does it say?
Relation messages does not exist. But
Okay, so that we fixed by adding this database chat up in the client. We had to tell the client what database to connect into.
okay, I have that.
And did you save your file?
Yep, it's up to date.
I'll be honest, I'm having the same issue as Brandon, and I'm pretty sure I have like everything in. So I'm with Brandon on this one. Up
Brandon,
to that point, at least.
Share your screen, and then I'll come to you, Brian, if we don't realize it's something.
Let me just get the chaos in order. 1 second.
Sure. Okay, let me request remote.
I also realized earlier that I was misspelling Postgres, so I was like, oh.
That will get you. Everything looks right there. I'm going to go to your beekeeper. Okay, you created your messages table in your username. You didn't switch it over to the chat. And so now that we're in chat, there's nothing in this database. So this is a great example of now we're debugging, but we're not just debugging on the front end. If the database isn't right, the back end won't line up with it. So this is all a game of getting everything to line up. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to rerun this. But now that I've switched over to the chat database, it will create my messages table in the right database.
But then
So now I'm just going to do a quick one for ABC now and true. Then I'll do one more for DEF now and false. And if I hit apply, now everything's good here. But because we're not making any file changes, this is a case that we want to reboot it. So we're going to do our Control-C to stop it, and then up Enter to restart it. And now when we go back to your Chrome and we go to 3001 messages. Come on. What? There we go. Okay, well, the screen share hates me. Change that 3000 to 3001 and hit enter, and I think you'll be back in business.
Yeah, I think I have the same issue as Brandon. Like I created my my messages database under my username. So basically, just to kind of reiterate what you did there. So I'm basically deleting the table from my username and then basically going through the same process just under the chat. Okay.
You got it. Yep.
All right. Thanks.
Kalai, go ahead.
I think I did everything you said, but still it's not loading. It's nothing
Okay.
is showing up.
Share your screen. Let's take a look. Let me request remote. And I'm going to go, because 3001 isn't loading, I'm going to go to your back end, and it doesn't look like your terminal is running on the back end. So what we need to do is open an integrated terminal and do, oh, it was there. It was hiding. I don't know where it was hiding, but okay, let's look at the one that was already open.
I have crashed.
So it crashed, and it's saying it crashed on 26. So 26 crashed just because we've got a result instead of a result. So now we're back up and running, and we refresh, and you're good to go.
Thank you.
No problem. It's hard when that terminal disappears, you can't see that it crashed, right? Like there's no way I would have found that error unless I could see my terminal, and then that's going to point me right to it. So keep an eye on that, and if that disappears, make sure you can find it again. Artrell.
Yeah, so my terminal and the back end, I got the app crashed, waiting for file changes before starting. I think it has to do with me installing the Progress.
The Postgres.
Postgres,
Yep.
thank you. Can I share my screen, please?
Yep, go for it.
All right.
Okay, so whenever we have an app crashed, we want to look at the error above it. And that error is module not found. So that means that we didn't get either one, we didn't install Postgres, or two, we're referencing the import wrong. So let's go to the top of your file.
Tell me when it's-
Top of the file, not top of the terminal.
Oh, okay.
And everything looks right there because PG is the name of the package. So that means that something went wrong in our install. So go ahead, back down to your terminal and hit Control C.
That might have been where I messed up. press
Now
Alt.
you can do your npm install PG.
Oh, okay. npm install PG.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now you want to do your npm start again. And we've got no errors. That's a good sign. So let's go back over to your web browser. And we're going to go to 3001/messages. And notice all of that is coming from your database. So you are good to go and all caught up.
Thank you, Max.
No problem. Lots of little steps here, but hopefully we're kind of seeing how it all ties together, seeing how that information is flowing. We're going to make it flow to the front end in a minute. Jennifer.
I think I fixed it. Can I see what your Chrome looks like, please?
Mm-hmm. Should just have whatever data is in your database showing up. It might not be that pretty. Probably looks like that.
No, it's pretty. I fixed it.
Good work.
Thanks.
All right, so for the last step, if we go, see, Exona isn't here to yell at me that I'm not sharing my screen. If we go to 3000, we've got my first DB message, my sent message, and my third message. Okay, well, how is that flowing through our beekeeper? Because all the text here is now showing up over here. How are we pulling that off? Because we're taking that query, we're getting the results of it, and we're sending the rows back to the front end. Now it's important to remember that this comes full circle. How did it know to get the messages? Because we have our GET request in our app.js that's taking the JSON and setting it into state. So we're going to do one more. We're going to get our insert message working. And then we're going to get a little bit more practice doing the full stack. How do we start at the front end? How do we go to the back end? How do we update it in the database? And then play the Uno reverse card. How do we get it from the database in the back end and send it back to the front end for it to update? And then we'll write some documentation. Don't worry, we're going to go through all of our numbered steps and make sure all of those are still accurate and generate whatever else that we've done tonight. Okay, so I'm going to go to my message input. My message input was already calling my post to the message. But now when I go over to my post on the message, I don't want it to push into my messages anymore. In fact, I want to get rid of this whole array. This array shouldn't be used anymore. All of my data is supposed to be coming from the database. So I'm going to delete out this entire array. And then I'm going to go down to my server.post, my message. And now I want to add that information into my database. So I do my await client.query. And what kind of query do I want to write here?
Yeah, post.
Post is the method type, but what do I want to write
Oh.
in the query? Even though we're in our JavaScript, we actually want to be writing our SQL query here. How would we go about putting new information into the database?
We'd have to push. No.
Push is
Insert.
a Java. Yeah, there you go. Push is a JavaScript array. Insert is your query. So we're going to insert into our messages. And what values do we want to put in? Well, I want to specify the column names. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Google.
I can't understand. What am I doing, bro?
I'm going to insert into, and now I specify my column names, right? I'm referencing documentation as I go here, because now we've got so many different languages. We've got our JSX on the front end. We've got this new node syntax on the back end, and we've got our SQL that we're interacting with. And it's like, whoa, we've got a lot going on here. So don't be afraid to pull up the documentation as you go. So I'm going to insert into messages, and now I'm being reminded, hey, what columns am I doing? I want to insert into, and I'm going to go to my beekeeper and say, hey, my 3 columns that I'm inserting into are text, timestamp, and sent. If it's the ID, that gets auto-generated. We don't need to worry about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, insert into text, timestamp, and sent. And the values that I'm going to put in for them, well, we can get away with the timestamp by saying, hey, the timestamp is now. And we can get away with this being a sent message because any message that we insert that we're posting is going to be true. But where can I get the message text, the message content? How do we get information from the front end to our back end? Here's our front end. Sending in the text. Where is it sending in the text?
In the body.
In the body. Wait a second. We know how to use the body over here. We are going to say rec.body.text. So I save that. No way this is going to work the first time because we already have an app crashed. So I'm looking at my errors. It's highlighting out await for me. First thing I know, await needs async. So I save that out. I have no errors right now. I go back into Chrome. I look at my interface, I type ABC and I hit send. Ooh, that's not good. Go back over here and it does not like something around the true. So to test this, I'm going to copy this whole thing and I'm going to go into Beekeeper. And in Beekeeper, I'm going to open up a new query. I'm going to paste this in, except for the rec.body.text, I'm going to say test. I'm going to hit the run button and it says, hey, there's still a problem around sent. What do we notice around sent? I forgot a mother freaking comma. Okay, let's try that again. I go back into Chrome. I'm going to refresh to clear everything out. I'm going to type ABC and hit send. And now we get another crash. Column ABC does not exist. Oh, this is where I can never remember if it's single quotes or double quotes. Crash ABC, I hit send. And now this is kind of interesting. I get another crash and it says messages is not defined. But wait a second, if it made its way to messages, that might mean our insert is actually working. How would we know? Let's go back to Beekeeper, go to our messages table and hit our refresh. Whoa. Now our new message that we sent is showing up there. Now that doesn't fix the issue because it's not showing up here and it's not showing up. We're crashing the backend. That's okay. We're going to take care of that after the break. Right now, if you've got this modified correctly, don't forget the comma here that I forgot. Don't forget that these are single quotes and not double quotes. If all of that is working, when we come over here and type ABC and hit send, it will appear like nothing is happening unless we go into Beekeeper and hit this little refresh button down here. When you hit that refresh button, if you can see whatever message you typed in, you're good to go. I'm going to start a poll just because I'm going to use that to determine when we start break. I'm going to stick around for a couple minutes before we start break to make sure that you guys have this working.
I'm close, but I still have it telling me my app crashed. So you said I have to go into Beekeeper.
In Beekeeper, go to your messages tab. If you don't have it open, you can double click on messages over on the left. And then in the bottom right, you want to use that refresh down here.
Okay, let's see. My terminal's still not happy with me.
That's fine. Do you see your message that you sent in the database as a new row?
Missed that part, Max. Where do I do that?
So go back to your backend
Mhm.
and hit Control-C to stop it. Then hit Up Enter to restart it.
Okay.
Then we're going to go back over to your browser on your 3000 and hit refresh.
It's still broken.
Oh, okay. See, it might be broken, but you knew it being broken there was problematic and you stopped me. And that's knowledge.
Oh, goodness. It's something.
Share your screen. Let's take a look.
Okay. Thanks. It's just didn't like what I did.
All right, so scroll up in your terminal a little bit. We want to see what the error is there. Missing parenthesis after arguments list. And it's somewhere around your query. So we just took 40 lines of code and narrowed it down to about 1 line of code. What the problem is that in our, let me request remote. Because we are using our $ curly brace here, what do we also need to use?
Oh, the back tick.
Okay, now it's not mad anymore.
Hey,
So before I let you go, we're gonna go back to Chrome, maybe.
I'll get you there.
Thank you.
Hold
Okay, so I'm gonna refresh everything out.
Mhm.
Good reset. We're gonna type ABC and hit send. Now it appeared here, but we don't really care about it showing up here. Where we care about it showing up is in your Beekeeper. So we're going to go to Beekeeper, and I'm going to refresh in here. There's your message. You are all caught up.
Wow, that's cool. I don't think I understand any of it, but that's cool.
That's okay.
We'll
Well,
get there.
it's not okay, but when we come back from break, we're going to go through that and write out all the documentation, all the steps.
Thank you.
No problem. Good work. Talai.
Both my terminals looks fine, but still the 3000 is not working, localhost.
Okay, share your screen. Let's take a look. Okay, so when it's oh, I have questions. Okay, let me request remote.
It says 3002. I did that, still it didn't work. So
Okay, so I'm gonna close out of your extra node one here.
yeah, sure.
And now on your 3000, it appears that there aren't any error messages, but oftentimes the error messages are hiding in your console. So in here, we're getting an error around this to locale string. And that we fixed a couple days ago. It got mad at us because we changed our date format. So if we just take this out, do I have one more? To locale. There we go, one more. And I'm going to refresh over here. Oh, come on. I thought I got all of them. 38. What? 38 doesn't even reference that anymore. I'm going to stop it and restart it. Okay, now it's just annoying me. Cannot read properties null reading to locale string. That's not. What?
Can we just close everything and reopen it?
I don't think that's gonna fix it. Like if it were, is that anywhere in your code? Search to locale string. That's not even in your code. Okay, close. Save, close. Right click, open an integrated terminal. get rid of this one. NPM start. Was it like running and oh,
just
now it's just annoying me. That code doesn't exist. Mel, any guesses?
Yeah, does it have anything to do with the date in the database?
Well, it's the thing that I'm more confused about is that it's saying message.timestamp.toLocale string, but the toLocale string isn't even in here. So yeah, it's definitely like the date format in the database, but that doesn't explain why Chrome still thinks there's a toLocale string.
For what it's worth, and I see Archel and Clyde, not to cut you guys off. This may be related. I am still back in when Brandon had the table. I had the issue with creating the message in the wrong table. I still have not been able to create that messages table with the timestamp. Using that now function at the end, like, so unless I've looked at like W3 schools and all type of web pages, I'm putting it in as like timestamp, like, and then now with like all capital with parentheses next to it, right? Like that's the proper syntax for that, right? To
When
make
you're
it
when
go
you're
ahead.
creating the table or when you're inserting a row into the table.
When I'm creating the table,
It's
to put that
just
as,
timestamp. It doesn't have now.
oh, okay. So the now is when,
You insert it. You
oh,
insert
okay.
a row, not when you create the table.
I thought that was like a way of like making it so that like whenever, okay, it just knows to fill that cell in with the now.
You
All
can
right.
do it with default values to make it automatically fill that in. But when we created the table, we didn't use the default values.
Okay, so that's where I was confused. All right. Thank you. That's all.
All right, let's try your idea, Clyde, because I don't know what else to do. I'm gonna quit everything. And oh, I know your problem. You've got an empty row in here.
really? Is that-
So let's see. Can I just delete that row and hit apply? Maybe that's the issue. I'm not holding my breath, but let's see what happens. We do the back end. We open in is terminal already open? Yep. npm start. npm, oh no. Port in use 3001. Well, I quit out of that. Why would that still be in use? Okay. Good. Okay, that's good. Now we've got a different error. Found object date. Let me look at my code quickly. That's in message list. Message.timestamp. Oh, I did have this in here. And Back in business.
God.
I think it was that empty row. So what was
Oh.
happening was it was trying to read the timestamp, and that
Okay.
wasn't in the database. It was set to null, and because of that, it just crashed.
Okay, thank you.
Artrell.
All right, in the back end, I fixed an error. I noticed I had an error, so I was able to fix that.
Okay.
Yay. So now it says running on port 3001. Do I need to test anything?
If you go to your front end and send a message, just type ABC into the input and hit send, that will actually crash your back end, but you should be able to see the message in Beekeeper.
All right, so I'm gonna do ABC, I'm gonna hit send. If I look in the back end, it says it's crashed. So I'm gonna go to Beekeeper.
Don't forget the refresh button.
All right, I hit refresh. I don't see the update of the ABC.
Boo. Share your screen.
Okay. All right, so here's my Beekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna hit refresh.
Okay.
Nothing showed up there.
Let me see your backend code. You are missing the comma that I am missing, that I was missing after timestamp.
So go to my front end.
Mm-mm. On line 27, after the word timestamp, you are missing a comma. Save, go back to your front end, try and send a message again.
Now, okay. From here, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm gonna hit sending.
It's tricky because now you've got two front ends, right? You got the front end in the browser and the front end as your code.
But I figured this is what you meant.
Okay, so now go back to your database, to Beekeeper, and refresh. Boo. All right, go back to your backend code. Let me just request remote. We're close. I can feel it, but something's off.
Right. All right, go for it.
Near the parentheses. Text timestamp sent. Text timestamp sent. No, that's not the problem.
My front end. Oh, okay.
Oh. What table are you inserting to?
Ah, okay.
ABC. Come on, Yahtzee. You're close. Just missing that table name.
Thank you.
But
Matt.
hopefully at this point you're seeing, hey, even I can't debug it until I see the error message, right? Just happened with Kalai, happened with you. We've got so much code going on at this point that we've got to narrow in and say, all right, where is what's the error telling me? It's telling me there's it got a parenthesis and it didn't expect a parenthesis. Where are my parentheses on that line? It's got to be something around that. Brandon.
Okay, so I'm getting an error that said, oh, in the backend console, it says a syntax error at end of input, but I'm not sure where to locate that. And
Share
then
screen, let's look.
And then in Chrome, it has another one. This one.
End of input, because it says PG protocol, my guess is that it's something with your insert. So let me just pull this out a little bit more. You've got an extra parenthesis here that's closing this one that shouldn't be. So this parenthesis is actually supposed to be over here.
Okay. Wait, but then, oh, okay. All right, okay.
So I'm gonna scroll all the way down. Everything's fine here. We'll take care of this one in a minute. It's just a warning, it's not an actual error. So I'm gonna do ABC and hit send. Now it crashed here, but that's okay. Mine is crashing here. What we really want to see is that in Beekeeper. Oh, so close. We've got undefined there. So you've got your rec body text, you're parsing it as JSON. So your front end in your message input is sending the timestamp and sent, but it is not sending the message text.
Oh. Oh,
So now to prevent things from getting cranky, I'm going to delete this row. And we're going to go back to your Chrome and refresh, clear everything out. Oh, nope, we got to reboot the backend server too, because the backend server is mad at us. Okay, now we refresh, we got our database stuff. I type ABC, I hit send. Now messages is not defined, but if we go to Beekeeper, we get our ABC and you are good to go.
perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem. Anyone else? Hopefully you guys seen everyone else struggle as a reminder to you guys that this is a struggle for everyone, right? You're seeing me debug this. This takes a little while. When we come back from break, we're not going to add anything new. We're going to just flow through our code and number everything out so that we're understanding where everything is at. Take a break. Be back at 7:40. 7:45. 7:45. I changed my mind. See you guys at 7:45. Jordan, I'll stick around if you want to power through, or if you want to just save it for the recording and do it then, that's also fine.
Yeah, because honestly, what it was, I was like 20 minutes late because we had just finished a union meeting. So I sent an email to eBay today. And there was the whole thing. But I
want to do, start breaking it down, start going through that documentation and saying, hey, there's a lot more we can add here, right? We want to get our update and our delete commands working. And once we do, we'll be able to test that whole flow. But up until this point, we want to say, all right, where is this data flowing? Because we went through and we numbered all 43 steps of how this worked on the front end, but we didn't have a back end at that point. So what we kind of want to break this down into is saying, okay, what's the project setup on the front end? What's the project setup on the back end? And then what order does that code run in, right? How is all of this flowing? So we start on the back end because usually the server is the first one to turn on. That means we're going to have a whole bunch of stuff that we need to renumber in the front end, but that's okay because that's going to show kind of the whole data flow from start to finish. So I'm going to start in my backend and I'm going to start numbering through all of this stuff. Now, I want you guys to stop me at any point if you feel like something just clicked and you want to repeat it back to me the way that you understand it. This is your time to do it. Numbering all of these steps don't help me at all. I know how all of this is working. What's more important is that you guys have that light bulb moment, right? So if you feel like you're on the cusp of something, if you want to just say, Max, 30-second break, let me just go reread that line a couple times. That is okay. This is not traditional schooling, right? It doesn't matter if you pass the test by writing the code. What matters is that you are understanding the code. And sometimes the only way to do that is to do it sequentially because there's so much code, you don't even know where to start breaking it down. So sometimes identifying the order that the code is running makes it easier for you to understand the code itself. So interrupt me, raise your hand. This is, even though I'm leading the charge here on numbering everything out, I want you guys to be interactive in this part, right? Talk to me. And you talking to me is probably going to help another student hear your thought process, and it might make it click for them. Any questions before we dive in? Okay. So we're going to start on the back end, and we're going to say, number one, import packages we need from NPM. This is the server setup, right? This is the first step of server setup. We need a bunch of stuff from NPM. Express is our node framework that we're using. Cores is what's allowing our backend to allow requests in from our front end. PG is our database. Then we come down and we say, number two, set up Express and cores and JSON parsing. That's getting our Express server going. It's saying cores is allowed. Importing those packages isn't enough. We need to tell Express, hey, go use them, go pull them in. Number three, we configure our database client from PG package and include which database to use. Again, just like we had to tell Express to use the things that we had imported, the same thing goes down here. We needed to tell it what database it's connecting to. Now we actually go into number four, which is actually connect to the DB using the info above. So now our client's connected. Our client's like, what commands do you want to run? We actually skip all the way down because we're not sending in a GET request. We're not sending in two messages. All we are doing is diving all the way to the end here for our number 5, which is listen on port 3001 for incoming requests. That's it. That's all our backend is doing right now. There's a ton of code in the middle of this, but right now we're getting started with those 5 steps. Fire the server up. When NPM start happens, the only 5 things that happen are the 5 things we've numbered out here. Does that demystify the backend a little bit? Are there any things that we labeled with a number that you don't get, that you want me to talk through the code? Feeling like the backend isn't too bad? Okay. So now what happens? We switch over to the front end. We just numbered the 5 steps it takes for the server to turn on and be ready and up and running. But now we need to jump over to the front end and say, someone just loaded our site for the first time. What happens? So we come over here and it says 1 through 10 is controlling the initial page load. Okay, well, this isn't quite right anymore because we've got our entire backend. I'm going to try and keep these numbers going on in the front end. I'm going to try and start it at number 6. So I'm going to delete out these notes here because they're not relevant anymore. And I'm going to say, okay, the app loads for the first time. What's going on? We still create an array of messages stored in state. So this is number 6 now, and I'm going to modify this. I'm going to say create placeholder array of messages that will eventually be loaded from the database. So state, remember, is our special kind of data in React. Whenever we have some information that should be updated and shown to the user, we use state in order to store that in there. That means if we set the state properly, the HTML will automatically re-render. Okay, I'm actually going to clean some of this up because all of that's coming from our database now. So we don't even need any of that in there. Okay, now let's keep going. We were on number 2. Let's go find number 2. Show the HTML header in the component. Okay, that's still accurate, right? We still need to show this thing called my messages. So this becomes 7. Show the messages list and pass in the array of messages via a prop. Well, this is an empty list. There's nothing showing in it yet, but that's okay. We're still doing that. That's number 8. Now we go into where our, oh my God, am I going to be able to keep track of what number we're on? 4. All right, let's go find 4. In 4 is probably going to be in messages list. Loop over all the messages passed in from the app via a prop. Repeat 5 through 7 until all the messages are displayed. Okay, not quite. Let's take that out and say number 9 is look in the prop. And remember, a prop is the messages. The messages here are coming from our messages here, which are coming from our messages up here. So when we say messages here, we're really referencing the state all the way up in our app. So look in the prop for the messages. It starts out as empty. So this loop doesn't run. We don't have any messages yet. That doesn't mean that messages list isn't going to try and loop over everything, but nothing in there, so there are no messages to show yet. So now we go to 5, determine if the message was sent or received. We're not doing that yet. We don't have any messages from the database. This is still empty. So I'm going to just knock that off. And determine if the message is sent or received, render the component. We're not doing that yet either. Okay, so now we go back to our app. We look here, show the input send button along with the 2 props of current messages and a function to update that. All right, well, that's still good. That is still showing the input, right? We haven't touched the back end yet. All we're doing is setting up this app the first time it loads. So we are on number 10. Now the front end is like, I'm done, right? I'm off the hook. Everything showed up. Put your header in there. I looked at the messages list. The messages list is empty. I made your input show up. I'm finished. And we're like, yeah, except for that one little hook at the end. Pausing there, though. Does anyone have questions on the setup? Do we understand kind of how 1 through 10 is happening so far? Is there anything that I can revisit or explain in another way to get you to understand? It's kind of asking you what you don't know. We did our backend setup. We got the server running. It's listening on 3001. We put the kibosh there and said, that's 5. We're done there. Then we came over and did 6 through 10 over here and said, what's it take to get our React code going? So over a couple different files, we got our state set up, but 6 through 10, now we're done. Now the front end is like, I did all of my setup except for that one little pesky step, which is going to be number 11. Any questions?
What was the section that you initially removed? I think it was in app.js.
In here, I removed out the example messages that were in the array because those messages are loading, right? We don't want any messages in our front end. We want to make sure all those messages come from the database. Okay.
I can
So-
see number 9, Max. Is number 9 is there?
Number 9 is right here.
It's on top. Okay, thank you.
God knows I'm going to miss a number in one of these files, and then you guys are going to go crazy trying to find a number that doesn't exist. Just imagining it being You know, when they have like the string lines up on the wall, and you guys are trying to figure it out, you're going to have a whole string. Okay. So now we get into the back end. So we come up here, and this is all new. We don't have any comments in here. This is our use effect. So we say, okay, number 11, run the use effect because app has shown up rendered the first time. We got our header up, we got our empty messages list up, we got our input up. Now this use effect is going to run because we've got that empty array there. So what's it going to do? It's going to say, oh, this is a function. We ignore all of this. Oh, just kidding. You want to actually call that function? That is number 12. Call the function from above. Okay, now it comes in here and goes to number 13. Make the get fetch request to the backend on 3001. 2/messages. Okay, now we go pause. Where is this code happening? This is our front end, and we're making a fetch out over the internet to 3001. And what information are we including with it? We're including this messages endpoint. And because we're not specifying the request type, it defaults to a get. So we say 13, pause. What happens here? We come over back to our backend. Our listen is on 3001. It's listening for that request. And it comes up here to our get messages, which becomes our 14. Express matches request to matches request to messages to this function. Okay, our get lines up, our messages line up. What do you want us to do? Express has given us this incoming request, and I need to respond with something in this res. Well, before we can figure out the res, we 15 use the client from number 3 and 4 to run a SQL query in Postgres. That query is, we could define that as anything that we wanted. But because we're connected into the database, this is the equivalent of going into Beekeeper. We're now saying, yo, Postgres, we need some data. And it's like, what data do you need? Select the messages out for me. Go get me all the messages from the database. And store the results in DB result. Now, there's all kinds of information in that result. It will include the number of rows and the schema of the table and all different kinds of stuff. And we're like, we don't care. All we want you to do is 16, send back the resulting rows in an object with a key of messages, in a JSON object with a key of messages. Send back the resulting rows in a JSON object with a key of messages in the response. So because we're in the back end, we get the request coming in, we go do whatever work we want to do in the database, making another API call, doesn't matter. Now that we've done everything, we need to respond to the request. In order to do that, we send back the response with this thing called messages that's including the rows of our database result that came from our select. Think about this as a two-way highway. Everything that it took to get the request in was driving one way. Now we've hit the back end and we go do stuff in the database. And now that all of that's done, we've got to drive back down the highway with that response. We're responding to the incoming request.
I do have a quick question. That key of messages in the response, is that you're basically creating that object, so you can make that key whatever you want to call it, as long as it makes sense when you have to reference it again.
As long as it lines up here.
Okay, that makes sense. All right.
And the reason why we do this, you don't actually have to send an object. You could send a bunch of different things, but we do it as an object so that if you wanted to add more information to it, you could. So like if you wanted to do something like num results and set that to db result dot whatever it is in there, you could add that and not have to change anything on the front end, because the front end is only looking for this key. Okay. Good question. Any other questions? We haven't made it back to the front end yet. All we did is we made the request, we figured out what we needed to, we generated the response, we sent it back, and now we've got to go deal with it on the front end. Feeling good? Okay. So now we come back here and we say 17, parse the response from the backend using JSON, and 18, set the messages from the DB and the backend into state. All right, now that it's in state, we go, whoa, hold up. Whenever data is in state, we've got to go re-render whatever information, whatever new information has gotten set in. So we come down to the messages list, and now, oh my God, can you believe it? We are actually close to the number. This now becomes 19. And we say messages have now been updated from the backend. We need to revisit this component. All right. So we go into messages list. And we say, hey, messages now has a new list to display. So we need to loop over that. Okay. So we come down here and we say, hey, if the message was sent or received, render the appropriate one here. And let's take this one out. So now all of the data from our database come through our fetch. We have the response. We need to make those all show up. So we go through here and we say, if the message was sent, if it was received, okay, where does this code go? That comes down to here. So we say, hey, all of that information from the database has been received. So we say 21A, 21B.
Max,
Yes.
little light bulb. I wasn't
for it.
understanding how we made our own APIs,
Yep.
but we're making our own call to the database, right?
Yes. And our API sits between the front end and Postgres.
Cool. Okay.
This is our API. We have made an API with 1, 2, 3 endpoints.
Mm-hmm.
That API server is running on 3001, but we aren't allowed to use SQL right in the front end. Why can't we write SQL right in the front end? Well, imagine if a user could just say drop table messages. Well, that would be really bad. We don't want to allow the user to be able to execute any SQL, and boom, there goes our database. Foreshadowing for later in the week. Just throwing that out there. So what we do is we put our API in between. We say, hey, we're going to make fetch requests to this. And you could be writing your front end in React. You could be writing it in whatever you wanted to. It doesn't even have to be JavaScript. You can make an API call to my API. You can do it in Postman, you can do it in curl, you can do it in the web browser. But what the API's job is to bridge that connection, is to say, I'm going to go run the SQL, I'm going to go process the data, and then I'm going to hand it back to you as JSON that you can do whatever you want with. Okay, so we've gotten these messages to show up, right? We say if the message was sent or received, show that information. Where's this text coming from? That text is now coming from all the way from Beekeeper through the backend and to our React code. We do that not only for the received messages, but also the sent messages. So that is 21A and B. Show the information. We're passing it in through the props. Nothing's really changed there. Okay. Now, what happens? Nothing. Everything is done. The backend has done the backend stuff. It's ran the query. It sent the response. The backend is done running. Well, it's just running in the background. It's still listening. The front end has showed all of our messages up. It's gone through, it's gotten the data, it's parsed out the JSON, it passed it from our app down into our messages list. Our messages list went, oh crap, there are new messages here. We've got to loop through those new ones. They now show up and we're good to go. Except for that one little last pesky user behavior. What happens when they go to the message input? So now we go into the message input and these numbers are going to be a little off. So we were on 21. So now we say render it. Okay, this is 22. The user clicks a button or hits enter to submit the form. They've typed in a message. Now here's this button and they submitted the form. So we go up and we go, all right, where's this form submit? It is now up at 23. Okay, prevent the form from refreshing. Now 24. Make API call via post request to messages. I'm going to say 24A, and then I'm going to say 24B. Make sure it is post. 24C is let the server know JSON is in the body. And 24D convert into JSON. Do one more. 24E include what the user typed in via state. Okay, a lot of information there. If we want to add a new message to the database, we're going to make a request to the message endpoint. We're going to make it post. We're going to tell it, hey, the data we're sending in is JSON. We're going to convert all of that data into JSON, and then we're going to also include the message text. Hey, backend, hey, API, I've got a new message for you. This is what you should insert into the database. So we come back over to our back end and we now say 25 request comes in to post a new message. So we 26 generate an SQL insert statement and run it that includes the message text. Okay, where's the messages text from the requests body? How do we know it's from the body? Because we're using rec.body.text. Where is this text coming from? It's coming from our 24E, what the user typed in. Okay. Now I'm realizing that this is where we broke the server and didn't continue documenting information. So our request is breaking right here, right? Because before the break, it's like messages. Where the heck are the messages? I don't know where those messages are. So we will have to fix this, but we're going to do that at another time because I've got a feeling that you guys are at your brain saturation point and there's not much more that can go into there. So we will pick it up here tomorrow of, okay, how do we send the messages back once we insert that message in? Tomorrow, we will also work on our update and delete queries and also probably get started on Sequelize, which is a more efficient way to pull all of this off. All of that said, any questions in the last 13 minutes? I know you can see it all working and you can kind of see it in Beekeeper, but do we see how we could do this maybe in our capstone? Do we start to see, hey, that data's in the database, and even if my server restarts, I'm able to still access it? Our trial.
I can see how some of this will definitely help me, but I will need some hand holding to get it set up correctly, like the proper order and the correct syntax.
Totally fine. What you want to do is start thinking through, though, okay, what's the order that needs to happen here? The page needs to show up for the first time, even if there's not any data in it. Okay, now what happens next? I got to make the API call to go get the data. All right, pause on that. Now I need a backend set up to do all of that. And so this is not, once we finish with the chat app, we go do the same thing on blog. We set up a whole new backend on blog and we get practice, making our requests, doing our operations, integrating that into state. You guys are going to have more than one example here. And once we get through that, we're going to get into user authentication, which involves the database, but is another way to handle signing in.
I actually had a dream about like state a couple of nights ago. Yeah.
We were trying to set state bank account $1 billion.
That's what it should have been. It was for my capstone, but that's what it should have been.
And that's exactly why we have a back end, because if it were only the front end, we could just say update table, customers balances, set income to, set balance to. But that's what we will protect against in the back end, and we'll learn how to use authenticated users to make sure that that's the case. Just to, I don't know if this is a glimmer of hope or a scary thing to think about, but you have after this week, a week and a half left of me, and then I am done. Nathan comes in for a week and a half and does full stack deploys with you. Laura comes in and does her career week module. Then it's all hands on deck for your capstone, getting it over the finish line, working on the presentation. And that's it. You guys are done. We are extremely close to that 24-week mark. We are hurtling towards graduation on 3/16. But because Nathan and Laura finish everything up, I only have, if we count this week, 2.5 weeks with you guys. So we're going to get over that full stack hump. We're going to get our chat app fully operational. We're going to set up an entire back end to get more practice on the blog. We're going to learn how to do authentication and use something called an object relational mapper. And then it's up to you guys to integrate it into your capstones, get it deployed with Nathan, and get prepared for your jobs with Laura. Then the last week is just practicing presentation and getting your final code polished.
That's scary. At least for me.
You
Me
guys are
too.
in very capable hands. Well, I can't speak to my own, but I can speak to Nathan and Laura's.
Yikes.
All right. That's all I got for you guys. If you have questions, I will stick around. If you're close to it working, I can stick around and help you with that. If you have just general questions, want to shoot the shit, I'm here. Otherwise, have a great evening. I will see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm one of those people who like does that. You're probably looking at me like, what the hell's he doing? Thank you, Max. I'm gonna hit you up this week for a one-on-one. On Thursday, do we have open hack?
Open hack, yes.
Okay, and then we also have the career fair.
Yes. And there's also a career program that Erie 21 is putting together, both Liza at Center State, and the Erie 21 team have been working on that. So I will have more details. I'm trying to get Liza to come in to class to do a presentation on that. But definitely have career fair on your radar. And if I forget to mention open hack tomorrow, please remind me. We will have Thursday off for open hack.
Okay, and what time would open hack be? I have a union meeting at the Marriott, 6:30 to 7:30.
It's 6 p.m. to 8-ish usually. So if you
Okay.
wanted to swing by after your meeting, that's totally fine.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, just
All
right
right,
down the
y'all.
street.
Yeah. I can just kitty corner over and then. But thank you very much, and y'all have a wonderful night.
No problem. We'll see you. Last call for questions.
Not yet.
I feel like for you, Jennifer, it's just like all sitting on the surface, but the good news is that it's all soaks in slowly, right? Like you've got it all in the right order, you've got everything queued up. Now it's just a matter of give it time and that saturation point will go down.
Yeah, I feel like I'm so close to seeing how it all fits together. And I can see multiple parts of this that I need for my capstone. So that's exciting.
Draw it out. even if it's a sketch, even if it makes no sense to anyone else, doesn't matter. Get it out of your brain. That's the hardest part, I think, of being an engineer, is getting it out of your brain. And then the second thing is being able to communicate what you got out of your brain to someone else. But if you can just, make it tangible, whether it's a whiteboard, whether it's a sketch, whether it's doesn't even need to be words, right? Like, just find a way to export it out. And that helps.
Yeah, it does when I've written it down and when I've done more notes or comments, that really does help.
Good.
Okay, so close.
I
Thank you.
have the hard part of at graduation. I need to teach full stack what you guys have learned in 24 weeks in about 3 minutes to every non-technical person in the room, so that when you guys show your capstone, they know what you're talking about.
Oh, better you than me. It's great. Have at it.
All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Have a good night, guys.